I'm just going to say it's 2020, Toilet paper shortages, hand sanitizer shortages, battery shortages. Apparently there's a little of everything going on. We are looking at Psalm 61 this morning, and appropriately, since it is a crazy, troubled-ridden 2020, I believe that in God's providence, He has worked it out so that we are pretty exclusively this summer looking at David's problems. We're looking at the stuff that David has had to deal with, the challenges that he has faced with Saul in particular, groups of people who are after him. And we've had the opportunity to learn how to trust God in the middle of hardships that aren't necessarily our doing. Now, there are a lot of times that we have to deal with hardships that are of our own making, right? And we just make mistakes, we do dumb things, and we have to pay the consequences. Sometimes we are dealing with the consequences from someone else's actions, and that's often been the case with David. It's really been the case throughout this summer of David's actions. Of course, we're not going to paint a perfect picture of David. He committed sin with Bathsheba. He committed sin against the Lord. And so he also is in need of grace and in need of a Savior. And so we don't want to paint too pretty of a picture. He is just a man, but we certainly have learned through his integrity throughout this summer, and we're going to continue to do that. Today is no exception in the sense that there are a lot of whys that we have to ask. Why David would have to go through what he did. Lord, why is he after me? Lord, why are they trying to attack me? Why are they saying bad things about me? Why is there chaos all around me? Why is it that as I live my life, I'm trying to do the right thing, and it seems like I'm getting pressure from all different sides? And to me, that sounds not too dissimilar to what we're dealing with in our world today. We've got a lot of whys, right? This year, there's a lot of whys. Why is this pandemic here? Why is it having such an impact on our lives? Why is there chaos? Why is there all sorts of things going on that we can't understand, but we haven't necessarily done anything to bring that about? It just happens. Again, it's people, they kind of go, well, it's 2020. I was going to try something new, but not this year. Right? That's kind of what I'm hearing, is that people are just like, let's just get out of this year and hope it gets better. Well, today we're looking at how David is again on the run, but this time it is most likely from his son. And so it brings a whole new twist and a whole new dynamic from this. So I'm going to dive right into Psalm 61. Looking at the first two verses is David's appeal, his appeal to God, which is often how he starts the Psalms. He says, God, hear my cry. Pay attention to my prayer. I call to you from the ends of the earth when my heart is without strength. Lead me to a rock that is high above me. Now, this could potentially be a reflection back on his runs from Saul, but is most likely his run from his firstborn son, Absalom, who had conspired to overthrow him as the king. And the interesting thing is, as was the case with Saul, rather than this warrior king, and he was very much a warrior king, rather than him stay and fight his beloved son, he again decides it's time to leave. He decides not to fight. And again, this is his second major time he's having to flee from someone. He says, I call to you from the ends of the earth. He's most likely calling from a foreign or praying from a foreign land. We know he had to cross over the Jordan. He left with a large group of people when Absalom's plan was made known to him. And so he says, I call to you from the ends of the earth. And this is sometimes how it feels when we're away from the place that we love, right? When we're in a place and there's difficulties going around, it is hard, especially when it is from times that we feel isolated or under attack. And so you get to that place and it just feels like I am at the end of the earth. And so I cry out to you, God. But I would say it's also possible, it's been my experience, it's possible to feel this way without going anywhere. It's possible to feel like you are calling to God from the ends of the earth right in your own living room. I know that's happened to me. Times when I have been surrounded by people and yet internally I felt like I was as far away as I possibly could. It's tough when you get to the ends of the earth and you cry out to God for help. And I think it's especially challenging, especially difficult, when there's something really deep going on in your life, something happening, as was David. His beloved son had turned and rebelled against him. Maybe you've experienced that, but you've certainly experienced something deep and difficult. And so David cries out to God in deep distress. God, hear my cry. And the thing that I find encouraging about this is that this is not some dignified prayer. This is not him trying to get it all together. This is him calling out, and it is raw. It is a raw outburst from deep agony. God, hear my cry. I'm crying out to you. I'm not just, oh Lord, would you please help me? This is David at his deepest pain saying, God, I need you. It's difficult. I'm broken inside. God, I need you. And David understood, as we need to, that it didn't matter where he was. He knew God was there, and he was going to call out to the God that he knew. He was going to scream out if that's what it took. And the picture is of David going up the mountain to where Scripture says he used to worship the Lord. He worshiped the Lord on the top of this mountain, and he's going up. His head is covered. His head is bowed. He is weeping. He has dirt on his head. This is a man in deep agony as he goes up. He goes into the wilderness running from his son. It is a horrible picture when you think of a father in that kind of a situation, and yet that's where David was. But David encourages us that regardless of where we are or what's going on, we can petition God without fear or pretense when our heart has no strength. Don't put on a show before God. If you're in a deep, dark place, don't put up a show and put on your smiley face. David was a man after God's own heart, and when his heart was broken, God knew that. God knew it because he was sovereign Lord who knew all, but he also knew it because David made sure that he knew it. David made sure that he was honest before God. And so I wonder if you've been in that place before where you felt so overwhelmed that you could describe yourself as having a heart with no strength. And this is another way of David saying that he was dealing with the deep agony of depression. Imagine the feelings of, how is this happening yet again? I've done nothing, and yet here I am, and my own son is after me. And in those times, it's hard to talk with others, and it's often hard to even pray. If you have ever dealt with bouts of depression, sometimes you just start to feel everything caving in around you, clouding in around you, and you can understand why David would say, I am calling out to you from the ends of the earth. My heart is weary. I am low. It is hard for me here. And that is when God's grace is most needed and we most experience it the strongest. When we call out to God. It is when God meets us where we are. And I would add this, for those of you who have been to that place. Maybe you're there now. You may be dealing with this. You may be in that dark place where you're dealing with a form of depression. You're struggling and you're having a difficult time even praying to God, even crying out to God at this point. That is the time when you need to call out to God the most, and that is where God's grace meets you to allow you to do that. But I would also encourage you, that is the time where you need to reach out to godly counsel around you. Where unless you are physically at the ends of the earth and there is no one around you, I would encourage you to make sure that you reach out and you start to talk to someone. And again, it's what we've been talking about all morning. It's a great opportunity and a great reason for you to be a part of a discipleship group, for you to be a part of a group of people who know you. And many times you don't even have to say, I'm struggling. They just look at you and they go, you're struggling. What is it? Come on, talk to me. And we need those kind of people in our lives. That's what the church is. That's what the church is supposed to be. And so if you're a part of the church and yet you're doing life totally on your own, you're not really a part of the church. You're not really being obedient to the call of being the body of Christ together, because that involves getting honest with each other and getting vulnerable with each other. And when it is that I have a difficult time going before the Lord because I'm struggling so deeply, that's where the people come beside me who are in these groups with me, people that love me, and they start to pick me up and help me get there. They start to push me towards the throne. They go to the throne on my behalf. They sit and listen to me so they know more deeply how to pray for me. They know where I'm struggling, and they call me out on that. We need to make sure that we are in that place where we can call out to God and we are working through these issues together. Notice here how David simply asks God to lead him to a rock that is high above him. I love that. This mighty King David admitted that he had no strength in himself that could save him. Lord, I need you to take me to a rock that is higher than myself. He was spent and he understood that on his best day. On his best day, he was, according to the way Abraham described himself before God, but dust. And he was unable to save himself. He needed a Savior who was much higher than himself. And this is the God of salvation, whose thoughts and ways are higher than ours and whose deliverance is as well. Man, David was drowning in his agony and humbled by his circumstances. He was beyond any efforts of self-deliverance, and he needed a higher rock. And I am here to tell you that Jesus is that higher rock. Jesus is the higher rock, the one to cry out to if you finally come to the realization that you cannot save yourself. That you have tried everything and life still splashes over your head, teasing you with waves of hopelessness. This is when we run to Jesus. Because those waves can be a blessing to you if you understand your need and if they cause you to cry out for help. But I would quickly add that crying out for help is only as effective as the help you cry out for. It's great to cry for help. We need to do that. And yes, it is important that we cry out to each other, but the question is are they pointing us in the right direction? And is it the right kind of help that we're crying out for? So to put it another way, don't keep turning to things or people who are no higher than yourself. Don't think that you can just go to counseling and that's going to be enough, unless that counselor is just going to point you to Jesus. Don't go to a friend who is just going to give you more platitudes unless that friend is going to point you to Jesus. Don't read books about self-help unless those are books that point you to Jesus. He's the only one who is able to help. He is that higher rock. He is the one who you can cry out to, and he can actually save you. If I'm drowning out in the middle of the ocean, I don't want another non-swimmer to come trying to get me. We're both going down. I want somebody who is a strong swimmer to come after me, or I want someone who is in a place above me, in a boat or something, to come and then reach and grab me out of the water. I need help that is actually able to help me, and the only one that is ever going to help you, I don't care how often you try or who else you go to, it's Jesus. Verse 3. For you have been a refuge for me, a strong tower in the face of the enemy. I will dwell in your tent forever and take refuge under the shelter of your wings. Verse 5, God, you have heard my vows. You have given a heritage to those who fear your name. So David now talks about it. He turns to those assurances that he is the one, God is the one, Christ is the one. And obviously this is before Christ was incarnate, but we're pointing and looking at the entire passage, the entire scripture, and knowing that Jesus is the fulfillment of all of this. And so we're right to say it is still Jesus in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament that is the rock. And so David isn't calling out to the unknown. He's not calling out or crying out to the abyss or the darkness. He's calling out to the one he knows. He's calling out to the one who has revealed himself to David and has delivered him in the past. And then in these few verses here, he gives us 4 ways in which God has shown himself as the one to whom David can turn. And so the first thing he says is, God, you have been my refuge. You've been a refuge for me. And we have seen this. If you've been a part of this series, we've seen this all through this summer, how David has learned how God has been a refuge for him. He's called out before and God has delivered. And most of this summer he's been dealing with Saul. Over and over and over again, he's dealing with Saul, learning of God's ongoing faithfulness as he always worked it out. Sometimes through unexpected circumstances were given for David to escape. Just amazing things that God would do, or through the mundane, God would still deliver. Sometimes we feel as though God is not delivering unless there's something supernatural that happens. And sometimes the supernatural happens, but sometimes it's through the mundane that God provides ways of escape. He provides ways of dealing with it. Often, as I said before, it's through each other. As I am at the edge of the precipice and God sends someone to draw me back. That is a provision of God. That's God delivering. That's God taking care of. And let us not be guilty of saying, oh man, I'm so glad you're there. You were my deliverer. No, you weren't my deliverer, but you were the one that God sent because He loves me. He knows He is the provider. What are some ways that God has demonstrated to you His love and His deliverance in your life? What are some ways that God has shown you that He has been your refuge? And if you can't call them out, then I wonder why. Is there something that needs to be dealt with between your relationship with God? Because you ought to be able to put down to put your finger on some ways that God has delivered you. Or it may just be that you're kind of like me and you're more forgetful. And so I end up having to write those things down. I need to write down when God has shown Himself to me, when He has delivered me, because there are times when I go through the next storm that I can look back and go, look how God delivered me. Man, there are many times that I have gone back in my journal over the last couple of years, especially since my dad got sick. And during those times, which is always hard to relive, it's never fun to relive a past dark period in your life, but sometimes it's necessary so that you can see God's hand at work. And you go, I remember how horrible I felt during that. And look what God did. And I wrote down that because I need to remember. It's like putting a stake in the ground. This day, God showed up. This day, I could say, but God. All was dark around me, but God. God was there. God delivered me. He is your strong refuge. He has been your refuge. And then, speaking of strong, number 2, he says He is a strong tower in the face of the enemy. Now, this is interesting because it contrasts what we believe was going on in David's life right then. This is the picture of a high part of a walled city, and it doesn't really lend itself to the picture of running place to place, like moving around in the wilderness. I'm constantly moving, and yet a strong tower gives you a different kind of picture. It's finding refuge behind an immovable wall of defense. And so it makes sense when you think of how much you long for a single place of security when your life is in utter chaos. If you, let's say you're figurative or literally, you're on the move, you're constantly, life is just pushing you in this direction and that direction, and you feel like your legs are beginning to buckle underneath you, and you just want something solid. You need a strong tower that you can crawl up into, and this is what David was calling for. And David said, no matter where I am, the strong tower of God, that high rock, He is the one that I go to. He is the one that I depend on. He is the one that we see repeatedly, time after time, that David ran to. You are a strong tower. His son Solomon wrote in Proverbs 18:10, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are protected. Which this is a side, but let me just say, parents, that's what you need to be instilling in your kids. David called out for God to be a strong tower. Solomon, his son, said, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are protected. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I believe that there's something of David's life that was poured into Solomon where Solomon understood from his dad, I know that God is the one. He is the strong tower. That is the language I've heard him use. It is the language I use because I know it's true. And the glory of this is that the tower is never far away from us. He is right there with us, and He says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. That is your strong tower. That is the one that you are to run to. If you are in need of strength and security, then you run to the strong tower of Jesus. Number 3, he says, a tent. You're a tent that I will dwell in forever. This one is closely related to the tabernacle that was the place where God dwelt with His people in the wilderness. It's where they worshiped. And David was confident that God would welcome him into His presence and he would stay in His presence forever through faith, eternally in fellowship with him. But he also understood that he had already experienced that kind of presence, that kind of relationship with God, that kind of intimacy in worship, even in the trials, in the midst of the trials, not just after, but while they were still going on. And so this gives us a picture of a place of intimate fellowship in which God is both his security and the object of his worship. Just as in Psalm 59, God is to be worshiped in the midst of our trials because he is there in the midst of it and because of who he is as the strong tower, as the tent of dwelling. Are you able to worship God when things go wrong? Just think about that. Reflect on your life a little bit. When things really go wrong, when things go badly for you, when it looks like all is going dark, are you able to say, "Yet I will worship you, Lord. I will give you thanks. I will give you praise because of who you are"? Is he the one who is supposed to do everything the way that you want, and when he doesn't, is he to blame? When you struggle, is it the why God? Or maybe it could be, why not God? Why not me? Why should I be preserved from this? Why shouldn't I have to go through this? But I know that in the midst of it, you are there because you are a tent, and I will dwell in your presence now and forever. And finally, number 4, he talked of wings that I shelter under. So this theme of safety continues as David says this. He sees himself as safe in God's care, the way little chicks are under the wing of the mother hen. And this is a common theme in Scripture. Ruth chapter 2 verse 12, "May the Lord reward you for what you have done, and may you receive a full reward from the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Psalm 17:8, "Protect me as the pupil of your eye, hide me in the shadow of your wings." Psalm 63:7, "Because you are my helper, I will rejoice in the shadow of your wings." And Psalm 91:4, "He will cover you with his feathers. You will take refuge under his wings." I think this one, like no other that David has said here, is the one that's most comforting. It's the one, yes, the strong tower, we need that, but the one that shows the compassion of God, that shows how he loves you intimately and personally. Yes, he is your strong tower. Yes, he is a refuge. Yes, he is that solid. But there's a personal aspect of this that is deeper than the other illustrations. As a matter of fact, Derek Kidner added an additional element to this section. He pointed out the possibility that David is speaking of God's protection in ever-increasing personal language. Here's what he said. God's safekeeping is viewed here in increasingly personal terms as the aloof ruggedness of a high crag of verse 2 gives place to the purpose-built tower of verse 3. And this, in turn, to the hospitality of the frail tent with its implication of safety among friends. And finally, the affectionate parental shelter symbolized by the wings. This, against all appearances, is the best security of all. And I would argue that we need all of that. We need all of that all of those dynamics of who God is. It is important for us to understand that this is who our God is. And then in verse 5, "God, you have heard my vows. You have given a heritage to those who fear your name." So through all of this imagery, David reminds himself of the assurance of security to be found in God alone, leading him to confidence that God has provided a heritage to those who fear him. And to fear him is to honor him and to trust him. David is one who feared God as the sovereign. He understood that God was not obligated to him personally, but God was a God of grace and compassion, and so he feared him rightly in the sense that he trusted him and he obeyed him, he followed him. When he sinned, he tearfully went back to him and cried out for mercy. He didn't assume it. He simply went to God and said, "Lord, I admit that I have been wrong. I know that I am deserving of punishment. Have mercy on me, O God." And David still had to deal with the consequences of his sin, and they were severe. And so he understood that the fear of God was important. It is who he was. God was a holy God. God is a holy God. And so, yes, he is intimate in his relationship to us, but he is also holy. And so we strike that balance the way David did. Verse 6 and 7. Add days to the king's life. May his years span many generations. May he sit enthroned before God forever. Appoint faithful love and truth to guard him. Now, I kind of term this as David's prophetic prayer, just because there's so much here that is more than just David. It's like he flies out to the 30,000-foot view and he says, this is more than just me, though it does include me. And so it's more than just that simple prayer for protection, but it's calling on God to remember his covenant and to fulfill his promise to establish David's throne forever. God, add days to the king's life. May his years span many generations. That goes beyond just David. Many generations is looking way down in the future. May he sit enthroned before God forever. David's not talking about himself there. Appoint faithful love and truth to guard him. 2 Samuel chapter 7. Before all of this happened, verse 11, the Lord declares to you, the Lord himself will make a house for you. He's talking to David. When your time comes and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up after you your descendant who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will discipline with a rod and blows from mortals. But my faithful love will never leave him as it did when I removed it from Saul, whom I removed before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure before me forever, and your throne will be established forever. The big picture here is the establishment and the continuation of David's kingdom, David's throne, through God's kingdom in Christ. So David calls on God for protection to ensure that this would happen, and it did, since the prophecy in 2 Samuel is fulfilled in the birth of Christ, in the incarnation of Jesus as the descendants of David. So we look at that and we go, our hope is certain, because long before all of this happened, God gave this to David. David, through the line of David, came Jesus, and we see the life of Jesus before us. He is the one who is faithful. God was faithful to his promise. God is always faithful to his promises. And no, he didn't promise that David would never die. He didn't do that. He doesn't promise us that we won't encounter problems and trials and difficulties and that we won't die. But he does give us a hope forever. He gives us a solid rock, a fortress to hold on to. And in verse 8, then I will continually sing of your name, fulfilling my vows day by day. So David understands that in light of God's faithfulness, there was no way he was ever going to be able to repay God. He knew that. It's God's faithfulness. It's God who did that. But he says, I will renew my commitment to you. I will fulfill my vows day by day. So David renews his commitment to God to perpetual worship and walking in obedience for the rest of his life. There is no way that you and I can ever repay God for what he has done. There's no way that we can fulfill a vow to God that will even the record. It's all grace. And I hope that you understand that from the point of running to God with our fears and our anxiety and our trouble and taking it before him and dealing with our feelings of depression. And Lord, it feels hopeless, and yet I come to you and you meet me where I am. You are there for me. You deliver me out of this dark place. You are the one that I call to. And so, Lord, I'm going to pay you back. That's not David's attitude. David's attitude was, I fear you, I love you, I serve you. So as I look on what you have done, as I look on who you are, then I will continue to perpetually worship you because you are worthy of being worshiped, and I will walk in obedience with you day by day. Man, I want to encourage you, because we're about to wrap up this series. Next week will be the last of the Psalms for this season. But I really want to encourage you to reflect on what God has done in your life. I want to encourage you to reflect on his deliverance, his love, his grace. But I also want to encourage some of you who may not have gotten to that point and you've never trusted in Jesus. You've trusted in yourself. You've trusted in your ability. You've trusted in your family. You've trusted in your friends, your bank account, whatever. You've trusted in everything that will not keep you afloat. There's nothing except for Jesus who is going to deliver you. So I want to encourage you if you get to that place where you understand your hopelessness, if you get to that place where you understand you can't save yourself because your efforts have never led you to peace and joy and freedom, I'm going to encourage you to run to Jesus. Believe in Him. Trust in Him. And determine, I'm going to walk day by day worshiping Him, following Him in obedience as He leads me through this life into my home sweet home. One of the most wonderful things that I've been a part of lately was the memorial service for John Fernandez yesterday, and just to hear several people just talk about how amazing it was to see the transformation of John from when we first knew him some 9-10 years ago to who he was when he was escorted into his eternal home. And it's amazing. I reflected yesterday on how he's one of those people that he like blows the curve for people who don't believe in Jesus. He like destroys the test because he's one that you would look at and go, there's no way this guy should have ever gotten to where he is. There's no way this guy could live the last part of his life with such hope and certainty in the midst of such pain and such broken past, such a broken past with a damaged childhood and no family. And yet, in the end, he declared, Jesus is my Lord. He gives me hope every single day. And I know that He is my rock today, and He will be my eternal fortress tomorrow. That is the God you need to chase after, because He's right there, but you need to call out to Him. Lord Jesus, I believe. Would you save me? Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for having mercy on us, showing your compassion to us. I pray, Lord Jesus, that through all of the challenges that we face, Lord, hold us close. I know we are prone to wander and to depend on ourselves and depend on all the resources that we have around us. And yet, Father, time and time, they demonstrate themselves unworthy and not up to the task. Give us your grace, I pray, Lord, in the name of Christ. Amen.